Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV. My name's Andrew Sumner, and I am beyond privileged to be joined by the one and only Michael Moorcock, one of my all-time favorite authors, as he knows. And as he's just found out, one of my all-time favorite artists, P. Craig Russell. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for asking.
Yep. And we're here to talk about the latest in Titan Comics' ongoing Michael Moorcock library, the latest collection of Michael and Craig's Stormbringer, which is going to be on sale on the 20th of July, and which you can order from the links attached to this interview. Now this is a wonderful piece of work that I own in its original incarnation, back when it was published in the late 90s by Dark Horse, I think. Dark Horse and Tops, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So first of all, gents, what I'd like to ask you is, how did this project come about? How did you collaborating on Stormbringer come together?
Well, who goes first there? It had been rattling around for about 10 years, I think, Stormbringer. After there were 5 volumes, I think, of the Elric stories from various Marvel and Pacific, and then First Comics, were they a part of that? Anyway, I worked on the first 2.
No, first I think we were separate. They were in Chicago, I think, weren't they? They weren't part of the same group as you originally. You were originally working for, did a job for Marvel, right? That was the first.
Yes,
the first one.
Yeah.
Dreaming City.
There was a book by Pacific Comics, wasn't there? If I recall correctly.
They were the same outfit, I think. I think they just changed their name, as I recall. One of them did. I mean, it was a strange. I mean, they were very idealistic. And they had a lot of ambition, but I think they just were slightly underfinanced, I would say, for what they were trying to do, because they gradually the work deteriorated, which wasn't good.
Right. Yes.
And they invested a lot into what are they called? Classics Illustrated, which they tried to do as a new sort of thing, rather than as the kind of formal ones that they use better artists, or at least more interesting layouts and that sort of thing. And I think that took all their money and they went bust, essentially. So that was it. Even if they would have done Stormbringer, I mean, well, they wouldn't have done, because they couldn't have paid anybody for it. So I think that's what happened, isn't it, Craig? I mean, I know you slowly went off the project, for obvious reasons, and Mike took over.
Gilbert worked on the 2nd and 3rd series, and maybe the 4th. I'm not sure, but then the 5th,
I'm not sure either.
He was off, and the whole thing sort of deteriorated. The 5th volume, I don't think, brought glory to anyone. But until then, it was going well, and then there was the hiatus. I had other things to do, and I had the position. I didn't want to do it unless I could work on the adaptation and script myself. And so that sort of held it up until the ice broke and they said, okay, you can do the script. And I had done enough in working with your novels and stories and other people's. I did some of the Classics Illustrated, that I had the chops to fashion a script from a pre-existing piece, remain faithful to it, and come up with visual solutions to storytelling. And that's what I wanted to do with Stormbringer.
Well, you did all right with Wagner.
If you can do an opera, if you can find pictures for an opera. But I cut my teeth on Dreaming City, and that I didn't script it. Roy Thomas did a synopsis, Marvel style. But instead of just following the synopsis, I took your story, The Dreaming City, and followed along with it, and picked out the dialogue and worked that into it without having to do the final script myself. It was like training wheels. I had the synopsis, I had yours, and then Roy had the final say in the script, and that was a good way to work into it, learning how to do adaptations.
Craig, could I ask, was this timeline-wise A great favourite of mine, of yours, was your run in Amazing Adventures on Killraven on War of the Worlds.
Yes.
Is this after you'd done War of the Worlds? Is it at the same time?
A few years after. War of
Yeah.
the Worlds was 74 to 70, early 77, and then Dreaming City was 1979. So I was already, it's a great training ground to a point, that Marvel synopsis, in that the artist is given the synopsis and you're forced by that to learn how to tell a story visually, almost like a silent movie. And if you have a panel by panel script, you really get no training in how to tell a story visually. You're just sort of a handmaiden. So working with, now Don McGregor did really tight synopses, pages and pages. And other guys would do like a 3-page synopsis panel, pages 12 to 15. They fight. Well, you're not left with much except your imagination. And so you learn how to do something that way.
Yeah.
And that's good training also. I mean, so many of the great directors that, like Hitchcock and Ford, that came through silent movies for the next 30 years into the 1960s and 70s were great visual storytellers.
Yeah. Am I right in thinking, if I remember this correctly, that you originally trained with Dan Adkins?
Yes,
Right,
he was my
yeah.
mentor that got me into Marvel Comics. And just bizarre luck. We were in Ohio, and I was going to art school in Cincinnati, and he'd moved back to Ohio, where he was from, after working with Wally Wood and Marvel Comics. And my dad, who had a shoe store, needed a piece of art for an advertisement. And he went to meet Dan because there was an article in the local newspaper about this artist living in Glenmore, Ohio. And he told Dan about this, his son, who was an art student and had 8,000 comic books up in the attic. And Dan said, well, tell him to come out and meet me, because he was trying to get an art studio going in the wilds of Ohio. And I showed him my work, and he said he could get me into Marvel Comics in 6 months if I would work with him in a studio. And he got Val Merrick and Paul Galassi in too. They were from the Youngstown area in Ohio. And so that's how we got going. I wasn't his assistant, but he would always tell people, these are not my assistants, but he would do thumbnail sketches and layouts, and then sometimes the finished inks over our rather clumsy pencils. So it was an elegant way to get in to the business, because my first couple stories looked really good because Dan was inking them.
That's a pretty amazing trio to get together as well. Yourself and Merrick and Paul Goulet, so you're all in one place at the same time. That's like putting the Beatles together.
Well, I worked with Dan for 6 months and then went back to school. Actually had the temerity to take a leave of absence so I could finish my senior year. And that's when Paul Galassi showed up. So he and I didn't overlap, but we just one right behind the other. But Val and I worked in the studio for the same time, at the same time, for several months.
Amazing. Mike, when did you first become aware of Craig's work?
That was it.
Yeah.
The Marvel, because I was in London, and to be honest, I didn't have a great deal of interest in comics. I never did. In spite of working on so many, I didn't have I wasn't as interested in comics as I was, say, with the history of fantastic fiction or something like that. That's where I kind of went back into did a lot of kind of reading, because I just enjoyed it. But I didn't really have a great affinity to comics, really. In those, in spite of working on so many, in those days it was a factory job, really. I mean, it's probably a very nice factory job and a fairly easy factory job, but that's what it was at Fleetway. We didn't have any ambitions to do anything with comics. We didn't think there was anything you could do with comics. It's as simple as that. It wasn't until the next generation of people who are frustrated with all this, which of course we were, but we didn't think of fighting it, that things started to improve a lot. But so I really don't know an awful lot of artists. I mean, I obviously I know the artists I work with and have worked with, and I always have worked with artists. It's been, as you know, something very specific with me. I've just seemed to go together. You know, I mean, it just works that way. And from the very beginning. And I was just looking through some old Tarzan adventures. I used to edit, Craig probably doesn't know this, but I used to edit a kids magazine called Tarzan Adventures, which I turned into a sort of miniature pulp, because I didn't actually like comics much, but I did like certain artists. I liked Hogarth and I liked Foster, but I didn't like many of the other artists that were available at that time. This is the 50s. I think Lubbers, or Lubers, I don't know his name, was probably the best of the follow-ups. But so I was continually just looking for Hogarth and Foster stuff, and I just reran it all the time, or ran new stuff if I could find it. The reason I found a whole lot of stuff in Spanish. It didn't exist in English because there'd been a bombing and all the plates had gone. And I told him I could speak Spanish so I could run the Foster. I couldn't speak a word of Spanish, but I guessed at it, and I wrote the script. I rewrote the script of the original Foster, just following the pictures, just so I could get him in. Anyway, that's really my background. I worked with some good artists. Don Lawrence, for instance. I don't know if you know him, Craig, but he was wonderful to work with.
Dragon Empire, yeah, he was amazing.
Well, before that, I liked him. He worked in wonderful watercolors, if he could, and this was the first thing he'd ever done in watercolor. It was a Carl the Viking for an annual, and I did that with Don, and I really loved that. I mean, it was the first time we knew he could do color like that. You know, it was just wonderful. Anyway, that was a long time ago. So I did, yeah. Anyway, yeah. I'm gonna babble.
Well, I think what's so interesting when you talk about this is that, you know, and I've heard you say a variation on this before, where it's like, well, you know, I'm not that interested in comics, you know, but it just so happens that almost without exception, all your collaborators in the comics field have been the greatest artists in the field, whether that's Craig, whether that's Drie, whoever. You know, when you look at your list of collaborators, it's amazing. Yeah.
You've worked with Walt Simonson too on some Elric projects.
Yeah. I like working with him. We have a great relationship. He complains, of course, because I do full scripts, and those scripts demand a lot. And Walter, the multiverse one, Walter said he'd probably done the best work he felt at that time, a long time ago now, that he'd ever done. And that I'd sort of forced him to do it just by putting so much into the script. But he did it, that's the thing. He didn't, I mean, there was one artist I was working with at the time, which I had not picked and didn't like, and continued to dislike, who just wouldn't draw what I was asking him to draw, which meant, and I was doing a three-parter, which needed to come together at the end. So the characters had to look pretty similar. And he couldn't draw them. I realized eventually that he was actually taking most of the stuff off television stills. He'd done stops on a television and just copied stuff off that. So that's, Ivanhoe, for instance, was one of them. And he's also a much liked and admired artist. I do not much like him or admire him. I don't think he can draw. And I don't think he's very good. But there you go. I am very, I must admit, Craig, I am very demanding. I expect an artist to be really, really good and original and have good ideas. And those are the artists I'm attracted to and work with. I mean, I don't think it's odd, really. I think it is. I have good taste in artists. Yeah, artists have good taste in me, if you like. I don't know.
Well, I've always tried to imagine what it must be like to be a writer in this field, because like being a playwright and having to depend on the actors to put it across, you're somewhat at their mercy. And it's not always a happy thing to happen. Although if the writer does like your work, then they're very happy. But it's sort of something like making a film and then giving it over to the composer and to write the film score. And yes. They can drastically help or drastically hinder the idea you were trying to get across.
Yeah.
Well, Craig, to take your conversational ball and run with it and loop it back around to Stormbringer, When did you first read Elric, and what was it about the story of Elric that resonated with you?
All right, you might be surprised by this. When I grew up, you only had access to certain things. Now, out at Hill's department store in the mid-60s, there was that series of Conan, the Robert E. Howard series with the Frazetta covers, which is what got me into that. And there was Tolkien. There was no Moorcock. I did not know Mike's work until they said, are you interested in doing this story by Mike Moorcock, the Dreaming City? Now, before that, like working at Marvel, people would mention Michael Moorcock, and I'd say, I haven't read any, and they would look at me like, you would love it. And I did, once I read The Dreaming City. I suppose what I liked about it, with Killraven and some other things, I did superhero comics, but I wasn't crazy about that genre. Maybe just because it doesn't play to my strengths. There was so much in Moorcock's work I could look at and say, I can dive right into that world. The disadvantage was that I was not conversant with the whole series, the mythos and all of that. And in The Dreaming City, there wasn't a physical description of, and am I pronouncing it right? Irkun?
Yeah, Irkun. I actually, as I say to people, pronounce it how you like, because we call Legnano Leghorn, I think. So if you can call Legnano Leghorn, you can.
Yes. Well, so I just came up with my own, and I made him red hair. It just did not look like the later description at all. But then there I was stuck with that. It's been an embarrassment. So if you ever wondered why I had a red-haired.
No, honestly, I would have thought I was wrong, Craig. Honestly, I would have thought I was wrong.
Well, aside from that, The Dreaming City was one of those projects I worked on, and one of the very few where I did the coloring on the original artwork, which is a hair-raising experience. The lettering was done on overlays, but all of that was painted, all 58, 59 pages of it. And luckily, I've had this in storage for years at Ohio State University at their the Billy Ireland Research Library. And so it hadn't seen the light of day until this project came out with Titan to reprint it. And we drove down there and pulled it out. And watercolor fades if exposed to sunlight. It can be really dangerous. But this looked like it had been painted yesterday because it's been in the dark and temperature control. So we were able to do scans of it and actually rework some of the lettering so it fit into the spaces better. If you compare that Marvel Dreaming City with the Titan Dreaming City page by page, you'll see a number of changes. Not in any, we didn't change any of the words, and we didn't change a word of Roy's script. I wouldn't do that, but rejiggered it in certain places that I had left space for lettering. So you actually see more of the artwork now than you did in the Marvel edition.
Yeah, I mean, I know our founder Nick Landor is an old friend of Mike's, and he is absolutely obsessed with quality. That's his thing. So that doesn't surprise me at all. Nick's raison d'etre is like to do it as well as it can be done. And he's got excellent taste, particularly when it comes to comic books. And I know that process internally at Titan HQ caused a tremendous amount of excitement between myself, the comics team, Nick. It's this whole series, and we talked about this the last time we were talking, Mike. Being able to put all this together and put it out in definitive editions has just been such a pleasure for everybody.
Well, yeah, pleasure for me too. I mean, particularly because I have no filing system. It means that I've actually got them at last in a good hardback set. Otherwise, it would take me about 3 years to find them all and put them all together.
Now, I know, well, it's all part of the service, Mike. That's what we're trying to.
Well, I speak about this, Andy. I shouldn't really, but I still haven't had a copy of the Drie
Oh, well,
and
in that case,
well-
tomorrow, I might edit this bit out. Who knows? I might leave
Yes,
it
you
in.
might have to
Yeah, I
edit
might
it.
leave it in. I
Sorry.
might name this person, David Manley Leach, the editor. I will be speaking to you in the morning after recording this interview
Okay.
to make sure Mike gets his copy. Right.
It could
Okay.
just be, something to do with the mail or
Well, I'm
ships
sure
or
it's
whatever.
something to do with the lockdown and the fact that none of
Yeah.
us have been in the office. That has been a major impediment to do business.
Yeah.
I'm here in my beautifully appointed lounge behind my Forbidden Planet wallpaper, and that's the same for everybody
Damn,
else.
I thought you'd brave the streets of
The streets of
wherever it is the offices are. I've been there. I can never remember where they are. It's somewhere
Yeah.
near Tower Bridge, isn't it?
Right on it. It's on the South Bank. Titan
Yeah.
HQ is on the South Bank,
It's
right
yeah.
next door to the Tate Modern Art Gallery.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. It's
So-
a good place to be. I
Oh,
must
yeah,
say. Nice office to have.
Oh, it's a very nice office, and it frequently turns up, by the way, guys, in TV shows. So if you've ever watched Luther, which is the police procedural detective show, and if you ever his police precinct is Titan HQ, just dressed up with some like Metropolitan Police signs. So yeah, check it out. It appears quite a lot as police stations, and that's I guess
God, it'll give me the chills when I come in there. And again, no, I'm not sure I can do it.
That's the way Nick runs the place. It feels like a police precinct sometimes. And Craig, the artwork across the 7, I don't wish to embarrass you, but the artwork across the 7-issue run of Stormbringer, it's absolutely superb. And we were looking in the office about the colouring and the letters, which I believe were done by Laverne Kandierski and Galen Showman. How did you work with those guys and put it all together?
Well, Galen Showman lives locally, just about 40 minutes from here. And he would have been about 20 years old at the time. And he approached me at a convention and said, if you ever need a letterer, let me know. He's also an artist. He's doing one of the finished art in one of the stories for Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology series that we're working on right
that's
now.
great work. That's good stuff.
It's beautiful work and exquisite lettering. So that was one of the first, and Laverne and I have worked together for some 30 years now. So he's just automatically the colorist for whatever project I'm working on. Other than that, it was just sort of the usual back and forth with these kinds of collaborations. I would pencil it and Galen would do the lettering and I'd finish the inks and then send it off to Laverne to color. I actually did the series backwards. I did the 7th issue first and worked back to the 1st issue. I'm not sure why, except that I didn't want the editors breathing down my neck. Once I got that 1st issue done, they would then start publishing it and it'd be behind the 8 ball the whole way. So I started at the end and in the beginning, it was just tops. And midway through, they hooked up with
Dark Horse.
Dark Horse,
yeah.
But ultimately, it was Dark Horse that did all the editorial, everything. I'm not sure what tops had to do with anything by the end of it.
I don't either. I mean, I thought it was a great. I thought that when they said, you sold Stormbringer to Tops, I thought, great, series of baseball cards, just what we need.
Yeah,
we'll get some bubble gum with it. Every comic
right.
Right on.
Big flat piece of bubble gum.
Yeah.
Nothing but Tops.
Soul-sucking bubble gum. That would be awesome. And I am going to pause P. Craig Russell and Michael Moorcock right there. Both gentlemen had such interesting things to say that we got enough content for 2 episodes of Forbidden Planet TV. So come back soon and check out the second half of this conversation. It's equally good stuff. Take care. I'll see you soon. If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.